Hello. I'm continuing to read from my book, The Everlasting Gospel of Jesus. It's available on Amazon for free to read on Kindle Unlimited in English, Spanish, or French. And it's also available for purchase in paperback or hardcover. I'm reading from chapter 5, continuing to read from chapter 5, the Gospel. Adam's sons Cain and Abel were the first generation, the first babies ever born. Cain killed his brother Abel. God said, "Cain, where's your brother?" Cain said, "Oh, am I my brother's keeper?" He wasn't his brother's keeper. He was his brother's killer. Did Cain think he could just walk away free after killing his brother? God said, "This is what will happen to you, Cain. Wherever you go, the earth will not bring forth its fruit. There will be a famine wherever you are." Cain was shocked and said, "My punishment is too harsh." Cain was a farmer making his living growing crops. "Wherever I go, the people will want to kill me." God said, "I'll tell you what, Cain. I will put a mark on you so that people will know not to kill you wherever you go. Whoever kills you, the same curse on you will fall on them." God told Cain, "I hear the blood of your brother speaking out of the earth." When Abel's blood fell to the earth, it began to squeal. Abel's blood was shouting, "He killed me." God came to investigate because the blood cried out of the earth. The earth that opened her mouth to receive Abel's blood cursed Cain. When Saul killed the Gibeonites, their blood started screaming from the land, and the earth quit growing plants. To resolve the famine, David asked the Gibeonites what it would take. David found out it would take 7 sons of Saul hanging up to die in Gibeon. Saul didn't have 7 sons. He only had 3 sons: Jonathan, who was killed in battle with Saul, Ishuai, and Melchishuai, and 2 daughters, Merab and Michal. David had a history with Michal. Saul had promised her to be David's wife after David killed Goliath. Saul became jealous of David and tried to kill him. Saul gave Michal to be Phalti's wife, and they had 5 children, while David was running for his life from Saul. Saul and Jonathan were both killed in the same battle, and David became king of Israel. David agreed to be king if they brought him Michal. When Michal was brought to David, her husband followed behind her crying. Her husband didn't want to lose her, but David took her from him. After that, Michal lived in the palace with David. Later, when David retrieved the Ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom and brought it back to Jerusalem, he wore a priest's ephod and danced and leaped around the Ark of God. Michal looked out her window in the palace and despised David in her heart. When David returned home to the palace, Michal mocked him as a naked, crazy man because he had been dancing in the ephod. David was clothed in a solid gold priest ephod, dancing and worshiping because God had come home. The Bible says Michal had no child after that until the day of her death. David did not give them Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, a lame man who always ate at David's table in the king's palace. He gave Saul's 2 remaining sons and the 5 sons of Michael to be hung on the wall of Gibeon to die. After that, the land was healed of the famine. Although this may sound crazy, the earth has a covenant with God, and it will demand what belongs to it. As living souls with a body made up of the dust from the earth, we are relatives to the earth. When we murder and sin against one another, it has a negative impact on the earth, and it responds. Leviticus 18 contains a long list of acts the Canaanites practiced that defiled the land. God commanded the Israelites not to do those things, or the land would spew them out like it spewed out the Canaanites. I've always heard if you throw dirt, you lose ground. We should then be careful not to throw dirt because we cannot afford to lose ground. These scriptures make it clear that God has a covenant with the dust of the earth, and the earth has methods to use to obtain the benefits of that covenant. Mankind has individual obligations to the earth in return for the use of our bodies. The law of Moses enumerates the sinful acts that violate the covenant and obligations mankind has with the earth. The earth was so sick of all those sins, it could not contain itself any longer. Someone had to answer for the multitude of sins and murders that men and women have committed against the earth. That's why Jesus had to die and shed his blood on the cross. Jesus told his disciples, "This is my body, which is broken for you, and this is my blood that is given," the night he had his last supper with the disciples. Then Judas and the chief priests came with a progression and marched Jesus to the cross. They beat him with 39 stripes with the cat o' nine tails, and his back was bloody. The blood poured out of his back. They put a crown of thorns on his head, and blood came out of his skull. They took him up the hill of Golgotha, and they nailed spikes through his hands and his feet. Finally, they lifted the cross with him nailed to it and put it into the ground. The shock of that impact opened up great wounds in Jesus' hands and his feet. Blood poured out of his back. He couldn't breathe, bent over and hanging like that. So he had to lift himself up on the spikes driven through his feet so he could breathe. Soon the pain and exhaustion of lifting himself caused him to drop back down even though he could not breathe. His breathiness made him push himself up again on the spikes in his feet to catch his breath. This perpetual dance to breathe and rest on the cross scraped his back and scalp and squeezed the blood out of his back and scalp, while the pressure on his feet and hands from the movement against the spikes caused his blood to pour out of his hands and feet. This process continued for 6 hours until all the blood was removed from his body. Most of the blood fell on the cross. Some of it fell on the ground under him. The earth was so startled when it received Jesus' blood under him that there was a great earthquake. This sinless blood was being shed for all of us. The earth was satisfied and gave forth its fruit under him. The earth was so startled when it received Jesus' blood that there was a great earthquake. This sinless blood was being shed for all of us. The earth was satisfied and gave forth its fruit. That is the first prong of the gospel. The earth was satisfied with the sacrifice of the Lamb without spot or blemish. The earth accepted the sacrifice. The second part of the gospel started with the borrowed tomb that had never been used. They placed Jesus' bloodless, lifeless body in the tomb. Jesus and Adam were not made the same way. Adam was formed from the earth by the hands of God, and God breathed the breath of life into him, making him a living soul. Jesus came from heaven. He was the beginning of the creation of God.